Elara Vance had learned, long ago, to make herself small. She learned it in the kitchens of Frostpine Pack, where the fires burned all night, and the Omegas worked until their hands cracked. She learned it in the training yards, where the young wolves shifted with ease at 17, and she, at 17, had stood in the moonlight and felt nothing happen at all. No fur, no claws, no wolf. Just a girl standing alone under a full moon, waiting for a change that never came. That was 6 years ago. She was 23 now, and the pack had never let her forget it. "There she is," someone muttered, as Elara crossed the courtyard with a tray of bread for the visiting dignitaries. "The girl who isn't even a real wolf." She kept her eyes down and her shoulders straight, the way she always did. It did not matter what they said anymore, or that was what she told herself, every single day, until she almost believed it. Frostpine Pack was hosting the Unity Summit that week, a gathering of Alpha Kings from every territory along the northern border. Banners hung from the highest towers. The scent of roasting meat and pine smoke filled the air. Wolves from a dozen packs walked the grounds in their finest cloaks, exchanging polite words and careful glances, testing the strength of rivals and allies alike. For Elara, the summit meant only one thing: more work, and more eyes on her failure. Her own father, Beta of the pack, would not look at her directly anymore. Her mother had passed when Elara was young, and without her, there was no one left to defend the girl who could not shift. She was Omega by rank, and, worse in the eyes of the pack, wolfless by nature. A wolf who could not become a wolf. It was a wound the pack wore like an insult against its own pride, and they made certain Elara carried the weight of it. "Faster," snapped the head cook, and Elara hurried on, balancing the tray through the crowded hall. That was when she first saw him. He stood near the head table, taller than every wolf around him, dressed simply, but for the silver clasp at his collar marking him as an Alpha King. His hair was dark, his expression unreadable, and though a dozen conversations moved around him, he seemed apart from all of it, as though he were listening to something no one else could hear. Elara did not know his name yet. She only knew that when her eyes met his, for one brief moment, something in her chest tightened, sharp and strange, like a held breath finally released. He was watching her, not the way the others watched her, with pity or scorn curling at the edges of their mouths. He watched her the way a person studies something they cannot quite explain. She looked away first, cheeks warm, and hurried back toward the kitchens, telling herself it meant nothing at all. His name, she learned later from the kitchen gossip, was Kael Draven, Alpha King of the Ashvale Court. He had a reputation for being unreadable, cold, exacting. Wolves respected him. Wolves also feared him a little. No one, it was said, could tell what Kael Draven was thinking, and no one dared to ask. That night, Elara could not stop thinking of the way he had looked at her. She told herself it was foolish. Alpha Kings did not notice Omegas. They certainly did not notice the wolfless girl the whole pack laughed about. And yet, lying awake in her small room above the kitchens, she found herself remembering his eyes, and wondering, just for a moment, what exactly he had seen. The next morning, Frostpine's Alpha, a broad, proud wolf named Renar, called the pack together for an announcement. Elara stood near the back with the other unranked wolves, half listening, until she heard her own fate spoken aloud. "In honor of the summit," Renar announced, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd, "we will revive the old tradition, the Moon Circle Rite. Every unranked wolf under the age of 25 will stand before our guests and prove their shift." A murmur ran through the crowd. Elara felt her stomach drop. The Moon Circle Rite had not been performed in years. It was an old ceremony, half celebration and half trial, meant to showcase a pack's strength to visiting rulers. Every young wolf would step into the circle and shift before the assembled alphas, proving Frostpine's bloodline was strong. Every young wolf except her. She understood immediately why Renar had chosen this moment to bring it back. It was not for tradition, it was for her humiliation, laid out in front of every Alpha King in the north, so that no one, ever again, could accuse Frostpine of hiding its shame. He would parade her failure like a lesson to the world. She thought of asking to be excused. She thought of hiding until it was over. But Omegas did not refuse the Alpha, not without punishment far worse than embarrassment. And so when evening came, and the pack gathered beneath the rising moon, Ilara found herself standing in line with wolves half her age, waiting for her turn in the circle. The visiting Alpha Kings sat along the raised platform at the circle's edge. Kael Draven was among them, his expression as unreadable as it had been the day before, though Ilara noticed, or thought she noticed, that his eyes kept drifting toward the line of waiting wolves. Toward her. One by one, the young wolves entered the circle. One by one, they shifted, their bodies bending and reshaping into sleek, powerful forms, fur catching the moonlight as the crowd murmured approval. Cheers rose. Praise was given. Then it was Ilara's turn. The moment she stepped into the circle, the murmuring changed. Whispers spread through the crowd like a cold wind. Someone laughed, quiet but sharp enough to carry. Her father, standing near the platform, looked away. "Go on," Renar said, his voice carrying false encouragement that fooled no one. "Show them, Ilara." She closed her eyes. She reached, as she always did, for whatever lived inside her, whatever piece of wolf was supposed to answer the call of the moon. She reached, and felt nothing but the same silence she had felt every single time before. Her whole body trembled with the effort, with the shame, with 6 years of trying and failing in front of everyone she had ever known. The laughter grew louder. "She really isn't a wolf at all," someone said, not bothering to lower their voice. Ilara felt tears burn at the corners of her eyes, and hated herself for it. She would not cry. Not here. Not in front of all of them. She opened her eyes, ready to step back, ready to accept defeat one more time, when a voice cut through the noise. It was quiet. It was calm. And somehow it reached her clearer than every jeer around her. "Stop." The crowd fell silent. Kael Draven had risen from his seat. He walked forward, past the startled Frostpine Alpha, until he stood at the edge of the circle, his gaze fixed entirely on Ilara. Up close, his eyes were not cold at all. They were sharp, yes, and careful, but beneath that, she saw something else, something like recognition. "You have been trying to shift your whole life," he said, not loud, but clear enough that every wolf present could hear. "And every time, you feel something answer, don't you? A pull, a pressure, just beneath the surface, like a door that will not open." Ilara stared at him, stunned. No one had ever described it that way. No one had ever described it at all, because no one had ever asked. "How do you know that?" she whispered. "Because I feel it too," Kael said. "Every time I am near you." The crowd stirred, confused murmurs rippling outward. Renar started forward, his face darkening, but Kael did not look away from Ilara. "Your wolf is not gone," he said. "It was never gone. It has been bound, suppressed, deliberately, by someone with the power and the reason to keep it hidden." His eyes flicked, briefly, toward the Frostpine Alpha, and something in his expression turned cold in a way it had not been before. Someone who benefited greatly from a wolf strong enough to threaten his claim, never being allowed to rise. "That is a lie," Renar snapped, but his voice cracked at the edges, just slightly, just enough for those close by to hear the fear underneath the anger. Ilara's heart pounded. 6 years of shame, of silence, of believing herself broken, and here was a stranger telling her the truth had been something else entirely, a binding, a suppression, not her failure at all, but someone else's design. "I don't understand," she said, her voice trembling. Kael took one step closer, until he stood just before her at the circle's edge. Then, "Let it go," he said gently. "Whatever you have been holding on to out of fear, out of shame, let it go now. Your wolf has been waiting a very long time for you to stop believing you don't deserve to meet her." Something inside Ilara cracked. It was not a sound. It was not even entirely a feeling. It was more like a held breath, 6 years long, finally released all at once. The pressure Kael had described, the one she had felt her whole life and never had words for, surged upward through her chest, like water breaking through a dam. She did not decide to shift. It simply happened, as though it had always been happening, waiting only for permission. Her body did not bend the way the other wolves had. It did not shrink or fold into something small. Instead, The change swept over her like moonlight pouring down, and where Alara had stood, a wolf now rose. Not an ordinary wolf. A wolf larger than any Alara had ever seen, silver-furred and towering, with eyes that held the same quiet strength that had lived inside the girl the whole time, hidden, waiting, unbroken. The crowd went utterly silent. Wolves who had laughed moments before stumbled back. Renar's face went pale as stone. Even the visiting Alpha Kings on the platform rose to their feet, murmuring words Alara's wolf ears now caught with startling clarity. Words of shock, of awe, of recognition. And then Kael Draven, Alpha King of the Ashvale Court, a ruler who bowed to no one, lowered himself slowly to one knee before her. No Alpha King bowed, not to another Pax Omega, not to anyone, save perhaps another king. But Kael knelt there in the moonlight, his head bowed to the massive silver wolf, who had once been mocked as wolfless, and the message could not have been clearer to every wolf watching. She was no Omega. She never had been. It took time, in the days that followed, to untangle the full truth. Old records were found, hidden deep in Frostpine's archives, records that spoke of a lost royal bloodline, wolves whose power was so great that a rival pack, generations ago, had placed a binding on the line to prevent its rise. Alara's mother had carried that blood, quietly, protectively, and had likely known, before she died, exactly what her daughter truly was. Whether she had meant to break the binding before her death and simply run out of time, no one could say for certain. But Renar, it was revealed, had learned of the truth years ago and let the binding stand, unwilling to risk a wolf beneath his own roof, whose bloodline could one day outrank his. He had built years of cruelty on top of a secret meant to keep her small. The pack that had mocked her for 6 long years now watched, stunned and silent, as Alara stood in the same circle where she had been humiliated, her silver wolf settling calmly around her shoulders, like a mantle finally claimed. Her father could not meet her eyes, not out of anger now, but out of shame far heavier than hers had ever been. Alara did not raise her voice. She did not demand apologies, though she had earned every one of them 10 times over. She simply looked around at the pack that had never once made room for her, and she understood, with a calm certainty she had never felt before, that she did not need their forgiveness to know her own worth. She had carried it inside her all along. When she left Frostpine days later, it was not as an Omega slipping quietly away in shame. She walked out through the front gates in daylight, her head high, her silver wolf visible to anyone who dared to look, and Kael Draven walked beside her, not as her savior, but as an equal who had simply been the first to see clearly what the rest of the world had refused to. Behind her, the pack that had laughed now watched in silence, some kneeling without being asked, as though the ground itself demanded it. Alara did not look back. She had spent 6 years believing she was the one thing missing from her own life. Now, walking beneath an open sky, with a wolf finally free, and a king who had never once looked away from her, she understood the truth at last. She had never been broken. She had simply been waiting to rise.